Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. I wanted to deal with an important topic in knowledge, and we can consider it to be one of the keys to understanding and one of the keys to gaining insight on the path of knowledge. And I wanted to relate it to the issue of the study of fiqh. It could be related to other Islamic sciences, but I don't want to get into that at the moment. I just want to lay down a framework that's important to understand. The later day scholars, and I'm not talking about necessarily the contemporary scholars, but I'm talking about later day scholars. You find in our tradition the concept of comprehension to be extremely important, classification to be extremely important. So the ulama, they focus on the mind of the student, building the mind of the student, orienting the mind of the student, guiding the mind of the student. And so, in the case of the Muslim mind as it pertains to fiqh, there's an idea that's important to understand, and it relates to the psychology of the student of fiqh. It relates to the mind of the student of fiqh. It relates to the thinking of the student of fiqh. One is the idea of tasawwur. It's a concept that's brought from logic into the science of fiqh. You find it in other sciences as well. But as I said, we're focusing on fiqh. But I wanted to point to the fact that this concept is important not only for the study of fiqh, but for the study of other sciences as well. And so the idea of tasawwur is that you're able to describe an issue, you're able to conceptualize it, to think about it, and you're able to identify the reality. It could be the reality of what is wudu. It could be at a higher level, what is the reality of tahara or purification as a whole. Then wudu is being part of that. Then ghusl is being part of that. Tayammum is being part of that. And then under that, on the sub level, how do you do the istinja, and what is similar to that with regard to the purification of the self upon defecation, or even in the case of urinating, right? The idea of istibra, and the idea of purifying yourself from urine, purifying yourself from feces. All of that comes into play in the section of purification, and it even extends to the purification of the clothes. It extends to the purification of utensils. It extends to identifying that which is pure of substances, either food substances or otherwise. So when we look at some of these issues that we brought up, we see that the idea of purification, you have your main themes, and then you have your sub-themes, and they all interlock with each other. So when we talk about conceptualizing what purification is as a book of knowledge, what's important is to understand what are the major themes that you're dealing with. What are the sub-themes? How are they interrelated? Then, once you begin to identify what is wudu, now you get into the issue of al-hukm. What is the ruling that pertains to wudu? Matter of fact, what are the rulings which pertain to what wudu is? That's why, as much as we want to deny the importance of the ulama of the later day times, we fall into some serious issues. One of the things that I found, especially among the ulama of Al-Azhar al-Sharif, is the precision with which they use definitions to allow us to conceptualize issues. And I never forget when I was reading some of Shawkani's Ad-Durar al-Bahiyya, Imam al-Shawkani, Muhammad bin Ali al-Shawkani, rahmatullahi alayhi, rahmatan wasiya. And I was reading some works in the Maliki madhab and in the Shafi madhab, the other madhab. Especially, I saw in the Maliki madhab a precision of definition. And I realized that that was missing in Shawkani's work at Durar al-Bahiyya. He had another concept he was introducing. He wanted to introduce hadith in a simplified way and in a systematic way. A simplified way meaning that the language is accessible, and then in a systematic way meaning that he had a purpose of a purpose behind how it is that he organized the introduction of a hadith. And he wanted people to see how certain ahadith are key ahadith, and these ahadith are used by the madhab so that they can come to their conclusions on issues in fiqh, their rulings. So I began to realize the value of defining issues and how it is that definitions, what is wudu, and then I'm able to define what wudu is. What is tayammum? I'm able to define what tayammum is. I'm able to describe it as well. Then when it comes to the issue of understanding what are the rulings pertaining to the soundness or the invalidity of an act of wudu, it becomes easier. So the idea is you have to learn how to think about subjects. So the ulama, they focus heavily on that, especially later day scholars. That's why sometimes you may find in some of these books, there's not always a lot of mention of the detailed evidences, this hadith and that hadith, or the general evidences, this principle or that principle that is utilized from usul al-fiqh. You don't find sometimes a lot of discussion on those issues. Why? Because they want you to have clarity on how to understand the issue first. Then you grow to another level of knowledge and you jump from one text to another text after having mastered the contents of that text. So in that process, you're supposed to be building your mind. If the teaching is right, if the book is right. So that's a beginning point. But if you stay stuck with that, of course, then you're never going to be exposed to the principles of usul al-fiqh. You're never going to be exposed to how hadith are used, how ayat of the Quran are used, and how other issues are researched and how conclusions are reached within that science, or positions developed, better said. So I want to leave with saying that it's important for us to be able to define things, to be able to describe things, and then to know that that's the first stage before we can come to a ruling. What is the ruling? So if we really don't have an understanding of what wudu is, so when situations arise that may be situations that compromise our wudu, it's not so clear that we're going to be able to determine whether our wudu is sound. That's the same thing with salah. It's the same thing with other acts of worship as well. We have to be able to define these things, describe these things, have an understanding of what the makeup of these things are, and then we have to be able to judge whether the act was performed in a sound way or an unsound way. So those are two steps. Defining and describing is one step, and then being able to determine whether it's sound or unsound is another step. So this part deals with the rulings, the hukm or the ahkam. This part deals with the tasawwur, the conceptualization of the action. That's important in the mind, in building the mind of the student. And we have to know that books have their different purposes and their different reasons. And this is one of the reasons why some of the traditional texts, they're focusing heavily on this side and then just giving you the ruling, and you may not understand how they came to their conclusion. People, we want to jump to the dalil, we want to jump to the evidences, but a lot of times we don't have the proper conceptualization of an action in the Sharia. And fiqh deals with actions in the Sharia. So we have to be able to conceptualize, describe, define what it is that that is asked of us. Then we should know what is the order of importance. Is it an obligation? Is not an obligation? And then we should know if it's sound or unsound once the action is undertaken. There's more details to all of that, but that's a basic framework that I wanted to lay out, put in place, so that we begin to have appreciation for the richness of our tradition. In another talk, we'll deal with the issue of dealing with evidences or working with evidences and studying evidences. That is important also in the path of fiqh. So with that, we end, people. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh.